basketball players run between 4,500 to 7,500 meters per game, perform up to 1,000 different actions, and perform about 45 jumps, and only a few game sequences last more than 40 seconds. The work-to-rest ratio of a game activity varies depending on the action, intensity, and the moment of the game. Medium to high-intensity actions last approximately 15 seconds and have a work-to-rest ratio of 1:1. High to maximal intensity actions last between 2 to 5 seconds and have a work-to-rest ratio of 1:10. A game has an average work-to-rest ratio of 1 to 3.6, with a higher value recorded in the first half compared with the second half. Regarding heart rates, the highest values recorded are between 188 and 195 beats per minute, with mean heart rate ranges between 85 to 90% of heart rate peak. The physical demands of basketball are dependent on age, gender, playing position, and playing time. Nevertheless, basketball is an intermittent, high-intensity sport, with most actions requiring the anaerobic system. However, a high level of aerobic fitness, for example VO2 max, is also essential to generate and maintain power output during repeated high-intensity efforts, and to improve the ability to recover. The article, published in the Strength and Conditioning Journal, titled Conditioning for Basketball, Quality and Quantity of Training, by Schelling and Torres-Ronda, put forward a training methodology for basketball conditioning, which is based on the degree of similarity in relation to actual basketball, referred to as task orientation, and their associated approaching levels. The orientations include general, directed, special, and competitive orientation. This presentation, brought to you by Talking Sports Science, will be a summary of the recommendations for the 4 orientations and the 7 approaching levels. First off, general orientation. This orientation is associated with generic endurance training and comprises 3 levels: -0, +0, and level 1. In level -0 to +0, exercise can be performed with a variety of activities, where decision making is not needed. Low joint impact activities, such as cycling, swimming, or rowing, are examples of continuous exercise that can be performed in the -0 level, whereas in level +0, although continuous exercise can be used, long running intervals are recommended. The intensity varies depending on the physiological aim. The aim in -0 is aerobic efficiency, and therefore an intensity of less than 70% of VO2 max is recommended, whereas the aim in +0 is aerobic capacity, and therefore an intensity of less than 85% of VO2 max is recommended. For -0, the duration of the exercise bout is between 30 to 40 minutes, and the work-to-rest ratio is 1:0. An example session is exercising continuously for 30 minutes at 70% of VO2 max, whereas the duration of the exercise bout for +0 is again between 30 to 40 minutes, but it can also be performed using 6 to 10 minute intervals, with a work-to-rest ratio of between 2 and 4:1. An example session is 3 times 8 minutes at 75 to 85% of VO2 max, with 2 minutes of rest between each interval. And moving on to level 1, actions and movement patterns should now be similar to basketball, and depending on the player's level, can involve basketball skills circuits, but technical skills must be established first. If the player's basketball skills are not high enough, it is better to use generic run drills, on or off court. At level 1, decision making does not exist, or is very simple and non-specific. The main physiological goal of level 1 is to first improve maximal oxygen uptake, followed by improving the aerobic anaerobic transition zone. Training in this level is characterized by lower volume and higher intensity compared to the previous 2 levels. Exercise intensities should range between 90 and 100% of VO2 max, and the long hit method is recommended to achieve this. The duration of the long hit exercise bout is recommended to be between 3 to 5 minutes, and the work to rest ratio being between 1/2 to 1. An example of a long hit session is 4 times 4 minutes at 90 to 95% of VO2 max, with 3 minutes of rest between each interval. Therefore, the physical activity options in general orientation are vast. However, the only premise that should be respected is that the prescribed exercises should not limit the physiological demand required to achieve the training goal. Moving on to directed orientation, which is divided into level 2 and level 3, requiring all-out efforts. Both levels are characterized by short hit, for example, intervals lasting less than 60 seconds. It is recommended to perform the short hit sessions on court with exercises that simulate specific movement patterns, involve change of direction, and include tactical situations with specific offensive or defensive actions. It is recommended to perform the exercise without opposition, using 1 to 3 players, as more than 3 players will make it difficult to reach maximum intensity. In terms of decision making, for both levels, it is simple and it is basketball based, or might not even exist. The main metabolic requirement associated with level 2 is lactic acid metabolism, i.e. targeting anaerobic glycolysis, which can be achieved by performing sprint interval training. The recommended duration of all-out effort is between 15 to 40 seconds, interspersed with 2 to 4 minutes of passive recovery, using a work-to-rest ratio of 1 to 3 to 6 is recommended. An example of a sprint interval training session is performing 3 lots of 6 times 15 seconds all-out sprints, with 45 seconds rest, with 4 minutes of rest before the next series of sprints. For level 3, the main metabolic requirement is depletion of the stored phosphagens, i.e. targeting the ATP PCR energy system. This level is related with acceleration ability and can be developed by performing repeated sprint training. The recommended duration of the sprints is between 2 to 5 seconds, interspersed with recovery periods lasting generally less than 60 seconds. A work-to-rest ratio of 1 to between 5 and 10 is recommended. An example session is performing 10 times 5 seconds all-out sprints with 30 seconds rest between each sprint, with 4 minutes of rest before repeating it for a second time. Moving on to special orientation, which is level 4 and involves skill-based conditioning. Conditioning now takes the form of small-sided games, where decision-making is complex. Small-sided game formats include 2v2, 3v3, and various uneven-sided games, e.g. 4v3. Skill-based conditioning benefits include greater transfer of training. Technical and tactical skills are simultaneously developed under high physical loads, and motivation is typically higher compared to traditional conditioning. However, the following factors are important to consider: player's skill/current fitness level, number of players, court size, game rules, work-to-rest ratios, and player encouragement. These factors can be manipulated to alter the overall physiological and perceptual workload. For example, regarding the number of players, reducing the number over the same court size increases the physiological demand. Also, increasing the court size with the same number of players results in a greater physiological load. However, a smaller playing space entails significantly higher counts of technical actions and more change of direction. If we recall, the mean work-to-rest ratio of a game is 1 to 3.6. Therefore, variables can be modified to create work-to-rest ratios that are supra, equal to, or infra-actual game conditions. This can be achieved through manipulating player rotations, e.g. number of players playing on court and number of players resting off court, or by modifying game rules, for example, reducing or increasing the stop time for fouls and free throws. Also, player encouragement and motivation provided by the coach has been shown to achieve greater training gains and adherence when using small-sided games. To help achieve target exercise intensities during small-sided games, the assessment of players' rating of perceived exertion can be used. An example of a small-sided game could be 3 minutes of 3v3 using a full court with no free throws or 3-point shots. And this could be done 4 times. And last but not least, the competitive orientation. This is level 5 and is the most specific skill-based conditioning, involving the most realistic cognitive and physical requirements. Here, decision-making is complex and basketball specific. Exercises are based on 4v4 and 5v5, or 5v4 or 5v3. Having more players involved in the small-sided games enhances team-specific decision-making skills. Conditioning training is a way to improve player capabilities, such as fitness, cognition, technique, and tactics, but never a goal itself. At this level, players must be better at playing actual basketball. However, only training at levels 4 and 5 could be risky. Because the tasks are open in nature, it does not allow for an accurate control of training stimulus. Some players might not receive enough training stimuli through insufficient effort, for example, and therefore end up losing fitness, which is why a variety of training levels are needed over the course of a season to have continual improvements in the conditioning of squads. As a coach, the phrase "play as you train and train as you play" is crucial to instill the attitude you want in your players. For example, if the goal is that the team runs every fast break as fast as possible, fights for every ball, or collects every rebound, you must demand it in every action of every drill. When designing small-sided games at this level, follow the considerations talked through previously at level 4. A session example at level 5 is performing a 5v5 game for 2 to 4 minutes with 2 to 4 minutes rest before repeating 4 to 6 times. And that completes the recommendations for each of the 4 orientations and associated levels. From a periodization perspective, well-controlled training of general aerobic power development, i.e. up to level 1, should be carried out in the off-season, at early pre-season, or for players with specific needs. Whereas, during the pre-season, levels 2 and 3 should be mainly used to improve the ability to repeat high-intensity efforts. It is recommended to intersperse this training with small-sided games or actual basketball, i.e. levels 4 and 5, during pre-season in order to prepare the players for the high demands of competition. During the competitive season, skill-based conditioning and small-sided games, i.e. levels 4 and 5, will predominate. As mentioned previously, there is a lack of training stimulus control within level 5. Therefore, during the competitive season, it is recommended that a workout based on level 2 and or level 3 should be performed every 1 to 3 weeks. And that concludes the conditioning recommendations for basketball. As always, check out the full article, the link is in the description. Thanks for listening folks, see you next time.